Hello students, welcome in today's lecture. We are discussing our topic from Bio 1, the cell unit of life. And in that we have started one point, that is the eukaryotic cell. In this eukaryotic cell, we have already discussed some of the important points. That is, this eukaryotic cell is well developed, advanced than the prokaryotic cell. Eukaryotic cell has two important examples, plant and the animals. It has true nucleus. That nucleus is bounded by a nuclear membrane, and nuclear content is separated from the cytoplasmic content of the cell by this nuclear membrane. Mainly in the nucleus of the eukaryotic cell there is a chromosome, and that chromosome contains the genetic material which is in the form of DNA. In the cytoplasm of the eukaryotic cell, there are well-developed cell organelles like endoplasmic reticulum, Golgi complex, lysosome, mitochondria, chloroplast, peroxisome, etc. And here we have to discuss now in detail the cell envelope of this eukaryotic cell, because in our previous lecture we have seen that the structure of the prokaryotic cell, then we have seen the cell envelope, that is the plasma membrane, cell wall, glycocalyx, and then we have also studied the ribosome and the inclusion bodies of the prokaryotic cell. Same here, we have discussed one by one the different layers of this eukaryotic cell. Okay, in today's lecture we are also going to draw the three important diagrams of the cell. One is of the prokaryotic cell, that is the bacteria, and another two are the examples of the eukaryotic cell, that is the plants and the animals. So students, here we will discuss first the envelope of the eukaryotic cell, and that is the cell wall. So here we have seen that this cell wall is the characteristics of mainly three kingdoms, and those kingdoms are the fungi and the plantae. These are the two kingdoms, not three kingdoms, fungi and the plantae, because we have seen that the cell wall is present in the prokaryotics, that is bacteria, that all we have already discussed in our previous lecture. Cell wall may be present or the absent in the kingdom Protista, so it is not considered here, but definitely the cell wall is present in the two kingdoms. One is called as kingdom fungi and another one is called as kingdom plantae. You have seen that the cellular composition or the cell wall composition of the fungi is made up of one chemical, that is called as pectin, while cellulose is the main component of the cell wall of the plantae in chapter biological classification. So here we have to study the cell wall of the eukaryotic cell, how its structure is there, how it's carry out different functions there. So here you know that where the position of this cell wall in the eukaryotic cell, this cell wall is present as outer to the plasma membrane. After this cell wall, we have to draw the three diagram, then you will easily locate the cell wall position. But here, see, this cell wall is present outer to plasma membrane, because we have discussed that the outermost covering in plant as well as in fungi is the cell wall, and inner to cell wall there will be another cell membrane, that is called as the plasma membrane. So if we see, this is the plasma membrane, this is the plasma membrane, then outside to this plasma membrane there will be found another layer of the cell in eukaryotic, and that is called as the cell wall. Okay, so cell wall is present outside to the plasma membrane, or we may say that the plasma membrane is present inner to cell wall. Okay, now what is the main function of this cell wall in the eukaryotic cell? No doubt in prokaryotic cell we have seen the function of cell wall, that is cell wall gives definite shape to the cell. And second function is cell wall prevent the cell from collapsing or from bursting in the bacterial cell. Okay, these are the two important functions of the cell wall in the bacterial cell. But here we have to see the functions of the cell wall in the eukaryotic cell. Then which are the functions of the cell wall in eukaryotic cell? So here we have to focus on the function point of this cell wall. First function of the cell wall in eukaryotic cell is the same as in prokaryotic cell, that is, it gives shape to the cell. So due to the cell wall, there will be proper shape to the cell will be found. So we have discussed that, like the skeleton which is present in the animal body, which is present in the human body, which gives the definite shape to our body. Like that, the cell wall which gives the definite shape to the cell. So first function of the cell wall is it gives the definite shape to the cell. Second function of the cell wall is that it prevents the cell from the mechanical injury and the infection. So second function is prevent cell from mechanical injury and infection. Mechanical injury means any other substance outside from the cell cannot damage that cell due to the outer structure, that is the cell wall. Okay, and next function of the cell wall is that it prevents the infection. Infection means there are number of microorganisms like bacteria, viruses, fungi, protozoans which may enter into our cell and damage our cell. That we call as we get infection of the microorganism. When we get infection of the microorganism, when any microorganism enter in our cell, it multiply in our cell, then we say that there is infection of microorganism in our body. So first covering of the cell, that is the cell wall, which is present in the plant and fungi. No doubt it is not found in animal because animal do not have the cell wall. So in the fungi, in the plantae, that cell wall prevent the infection of microorganism into that particular organism. So second function is it prevents the infection. Third function is that it acts as a barrier for macromolecules. Macro means large. Macromolecules, large molecules which are large in size, which is large in molecular weight. Such molecules are called as the macromolecules, like proteins, carbohydrate, lipids. Number of other macromolecules will be there in the cell. All these macromolecules which are unnecessary to the cell, they cannot enter into the cell because the cell wall which is present there, which is acts as a barrier for this macromolecule. So unnecessary, unwanted macromolecules which are not required to the cell cannot enter from outside to inside the cell because this cell wall which is present in between these macromolecules acts as a barrier. They cannot allow this macromolecule to come inside, and that's why the second function or the third function of the cell wall is acts as a barrier for macromolecule. So here we have to see that the functions of the cell wall in the eukaryotic cell is it gives shape to the cell. Second one is prevent the cell from the mechanical injury and the infection, and third one is it acts as a barrier for the macromolecules. After studying the functions of the cell wall, we have to see the main composition of the cell wall in particularly plants or in fungi. So this cell wall is called as a non-living rigid structure. The cell wall is non-living rigid structure. Why it is called as non-living? Because as we have seen the chapter living world, if any cell is or any part of the living organism, when it is non-nucleated, we call it as a non-living. So if we see the cell wall, what is the cell wall? What the cell wall is non-living rigid structure. Do not have any nucleus in it, and that's why we call it as a non-living. And the meaning of rigid means it cannot bend. ते वाकत नाही, काय असतं अतिशय कठीण पाहायला मिळतं, that is called as a rigid. So cell wall is a non-living rigid structure present outside to the plasma membrane and it carries various types of function in the eukaryotic cell. Now we'll take one example of the plants, that is the algae. Okay, see here, algae we have already discussed in the kingdom Plantae in biological classification that kingdom Plantae has 5 groups: algae, bryophyta, pteridophyta, gymnosperm and the angiosperm. So algae is one of the representative of the plant, but blue-green algae is totally different from the algae. Blue-green algae, or which we call as a cyanobacteria, is an example of the kingdom Monera, while only algae is an example of kingdom Plantae. So if we take the example of plant, or if we take the example of algae as an example of kingdom Plantae, you will see that the cell wall, which is a unique characteristics of the plant, cell wall, which is unique characteristics of the plant. This cell wall of algae is made up of the different components, and those components are cellulose, galactose, mannose, and one of the mineral, that is calcium carbonate. Okay students, this is very important. You have to remember that the composition of the cell wall in the algae, or the cell wall in the algae, is made up of this component. Which are this component? Cellulose. Okay, no doubt. We have seen number of times that cellulose is the main component of the cell wall. Cellulose, galactose, mannose, calcium carbonate is the name of the mineral. So what is meant by this cellulose, galactose, mannose? Which are this? What is chemical composition of this component? So you know that carbohydrate. Okay, carbohydrate is the important macromolecule. In the chapter biomolecule, we have to study in detail the carbohydrate, proteins, lipid. But see here, carbohydrate is one of the macromolecule, and these carbohydrates are of 3 types: monosaccharide, disaccharide and the polysaccharide. Okay, so monosaccharide is, example of monosaccharide is the glucose, fructose. Example of disaccharide is the lactose, sucrose, while example of polysaccharides are cellulose, glycogen. Okay, and in that here you have to see that all these examples which are given here, that is cellulose, galactone, mannose, these are the polysaccharides. That means these are the types of the carbohydrate. Cellulose, galactone, mannose, these are the polysaccharides, these are the carbohydrates. Okay, and the mineral is there, that is the calcium carbonate. That is the calcium carbonate. So here this composition of the cell wall in algae is very important for meat point of view. So you have to remember that there are overall the 4 components present in the cell wall of the plant, in the cell wall of the algae, and those are cellulose, galactone, mannose and calcium carbonate. All these are chemically carbohydrate, all are chemically made up of the carbohydrate, and the type of the carbohydrates are polysaccharide. Okay, if we see the example of particularly plants, then which plants, there will be confusion in students. That is, algae is the example of the plant, and again we have mentioned the plants. Here, see, we have to focus plants means higher plant, because in plant always there are 2 types: lower plants and higher plant. In lower plants, which plants are included? Algae, bryophyta and pteridophyta. And in higher plant, we have to see 2 types of plant: gymnosperm and angiosperm. In the chapter Kingdom Plantae, we are going to discuss in detail which are lower plant and which are higher plant. So here one example of lower plant is given, that is the algae, and here we will discuss the one example of the higher plant. Maybe it is gymnosperm or the angiosperm. Then what is the composition of the cell wall of the higher plants, mainly gymnosperm and the angiosperm? So in higher plant you will find the cellulose, hemicellulose. Pectin. And protein. Cellulose, hemicellulose, pectin and the protein. It is a composition of the cell wall of the angiosperm, gymnosperm or the higher plant. So here you have to focus on the composition of the cell wall of both algae and the plant for NEET point of view. So these 2 points are very important when the question will be asked on the NEET exam. Then it will be asked on this composition of the cell wall. So for the cell wall content, these 2 points are important for NEET point of view. Okay. Now, if we enlarge the particular structure of the cell wall, then you will find the cell wall has 3 layers. Those are primary wall, secondary wall and the middle lamella. So here you have to see that how these layers are present in this cell wall of this fungi and the plant. So if we see the layers of the cell wall, okay, for that we will enlarge here our figure. Cell wall has, now we will discuss here 3 layers. Cell wall has 3 layers. Which are these 3 layers? That is primary wall, or we say that middle lamella, and the secondary wall. Okay, so if we see the structure of the cell wall, then we will find that this one is called as primary wall. Okay, this one is called as middle lamella, and this one is called as secondary wall. Okay, primary wall is generally present in the younger plant. These are the 3 layers of cell wall. This whole structure is called as cell wall. So primary wall is present in the younger plant. When the younger plant gets mature, this primary wall degenerates and only 2 layers will be found in the mature, in the well-developed plant cell, and those are the middle lamella and the secondary wall. But if the question is asked, which are the 3 layers of the cell wall, then you have to write the primary wall, middle lamella and the secondary wall. Primary wall is present in the younger plant, it gets degenerate, and only in the adult cell, in the mature cell, you will find 2 layers of the cell wall. One is called as middle lamella and the secondary wall. So here, what is the function of this primary wall? This primary wall, which is the layer of the cell wall, is mainly responsible for the growth of cell, which is mainly responsible for the growth of cell. In the younger plant, the cell's growth takes place with the help of this primary wall. But as we see that when this cell gets mature, when that plant gets mature, this layer gets degenerated, and at that place the secondary wall is formed, and this secondary wall is present inner to the plasma membrane, means it is very close to the plasma membrane. So secondary wall is present which is close to the plasma membrane, and when secondary wall is present or secondary layer is present after degeneration of the primary layer or primary wall. Then the middle lamella, which is an important component of the cell wall, it is made up of one of the important mineral, and the name of that mineral is called as calcium pectate. The name of that mineral is called as calcium pectate. So students, see here, number of times the question will be asked that which component is present in the middle lamella of the cell wall. Then we have to remember that calcium pectate is the main component which is present in the middle layer of or middle lamella of the cell wall. Okay, here just we have seen that calcium carbonate is a component of the algae cell wall, while calcium pectate is the component of the middle lamella. So it is also important for need point of view, that is the middle lamella is made up of calcium pectate. Okay, so here we have to see that the 3 layers of this cell wall are there, and primary wall is the characteristics of the young plant cell, and adult plant cell has characteristics, that is the cell wall is made up of middle lamella and the secondary wall. This middle lamella has one of the important functions, is that this middle lamella glues together the neighboring cell. So here we have to discuss the function of this middle lamella is that glues or hold neighboring cell together. See here, what is the function of this middle lamella? Which is the main component of the cell wall, that is glues or hold the neighboring cell together. Means it hold, glues. What is meant by hold or glues? If these are the cells, okay, all these cells are gathered together, because there should be interaction between the neighboring cell, and that's why this cell should be gathered together. So all the cells, neighboring cell gather together, aggregate together, become close to each other with the help of this middle lamella. So it is very also important that the composition of the middle lamella is calcium pectate, but this middle lamella also has one of the important function, that it holds or glues म्हणजे चिकटणे neighboring cell together. And see here, the neighboring cells of the plants are come close to each other because there should be interaction between this neighboring cell, and for that interaction this neighboring cell should become close to each other, and that function is carried out by this middle lamella. See here, in the function of the cell wall, one of the important function of the cell wall that you have to remember, that interaction between the cell is also the function of the cell wall, because outer covering of the cell is the cell wall. So cell to cell interaction is also carried out with the help of cell wall. See here, if these are the two cells, then here outermost covering of the cell is the cell wall. So both the cell wall of the two neighboring cells connect to each other, and there will be interaction between these two cells. So cell interaction is also the one of the important function of the cell wall of the eukaryotic cell that we have to mention there. We have mentioned in our notes. Okay students, so see here, this is about the interaction of the cell with the help of this cell wall. And the last point that we are discussed here, that is what is meant by plasmodesmata. So here you can see that if we see this is a cell wall, then you have to see that there are such a structure will be found in the cell wall, and those are called as plasmodesmata. It is plasmodesmata. Okay, here we will write this, what is meant by plasmodesmata. So plasmodesmata, what is meant by plasmodesmata? See here, cell wall and middle lamella. Cell wall and middle lamella. It will be confusing that cell wall and middle lamella is not two different things. Okay, middle lamella is a part of the cell wall, but in our NCERT book such a sentence is given. But you don't be confused that cell wall, if you say that only cell wall, or if you say that only middle lamella, then it also will be correct. But here what is given, that cell wall and middle lamella are traversed by plasmodesmata. Okay, are traversed by plasmodesmata. What is the role of this plasmodesmata? Which connect cytoplasm of neighboring cell. So as we have seen that the function of the middle lamella separately, that this middle lamella glues or hold the neighboring cell together. Okay, same function is explained very detailed in here, that is the cell wall, and the middle lamella is traversed by one of the structure, and here we have drawn the structure, and that is called as plasmodesmata. What is the role of this plasmodesmata? Due to this plasmodesmata, the cytoplasm of the neighboring cell get connected together. Okay, so here if we say that only cell wall is traversed by plasmodesmata, or only the middle lamella is traversed by plasmodesmata, then it is also correct. And don't be confused that number of students will see that, or we found that the cell wall is not a separate component of the cell, or middle lamella is not a separate component of the cell wall. Cell wall and middle lamella is a component of the same part. Okay, so you see that the cell wall is traversed by the plasmodesmata. Here we have drawn this function of plasmodesmata. Now we will see how this plasmodesmata connect the cytoplasm of the neighboring cell. How this plasmodesmata connect the cytoplasm of the neighboring cell. Now see here. Okay, suppose this is the boundary of one cell and this is the boundary of other cell. So we can say that this is the A cell, this is the B cell. A cell structure will be there, B cell structure will be there. Or we can draw the diagram of cell proper here. Okay, so these are the two cells, A cell and the B cell. What we have seen that these are the cell wall, and this connection we call it as a plasmodesmata. So what happened due to this plasmodesmata? This is the cytoplasm of these two cells, where you will find the nucleus as well as different cell organelles. So content of the cytoplasm of the two cells get connected together with the help of this plasmodesmata. So the function of the important function of the cell wall is the cell interaction. What is meant by cell interaction? The exchange of material in between the two cells. Some material which is from A cell transferred into the B cell. Some material from the B cell will be transferred into the A cell. That is called as a cell interaction. And this cell interaction is very easy to the cell only due to this connection, that is called as plasmodesmata. So here one of the function of the cell wall is cell interaction that we have to mention in our previous point. That is, we have seen the functions of the cell wall. First one is it gives shape to the cell. Second one is it prevents the cell from mechanical injury and infection. Third one is it prevents the unnecessary macromolecule inside the cell, or it acts as a barrier for a micromolecule. And the fourth function of the cell wall is it is involved in the cell interaction. And how it is involved in the cell interaction? With the help of this plasmodesmata. Because what is plasmodesmata? Plasmodesmata are the connection between the two cells, or which is found on the cell wall of the plant, which is found on the middle lamella of the plant. So we have seen that the cell wall and the middle lamella are traversed by this plasmodesmata. Okay students, so here we have completed the cell wall point of the eukaryotic cell. The important thing from the cell wall is that cell wall is the important component of the eukaryotic cell, and for NEET point of view, you have to remember the functions of cell wall, you have to remember the composition of the cell wall of algae and composition of the cell wall of the plants. Okay, now here we draw the diagram of the prokaryotic cell, because in last lecture we have seen that three diagrams are important for theory point of view. One is of the prokaryotic cell, another one is of the plant cell and the animal cell. So see here, if we draw the diagram of any bacterial cell, then here one thing is very important, that we have to draw this bacterial cell, and outside the bacterial cell we have to label the three labeling, that is glycocalyx, cell wall and the plasma membrane. So here this is the layer which is called as the cell wall, and outermost is layer that is nothing but. Diagrams are very easy, and by drawing this diagram we can also identify easily, or we can also study easily the structure of this bacteria. So see here, outermost layer is, we are labeled as glycocalyx, which may be in the form of slime layer or the capsule. Middle is called as cell wall, and innermost layer is plasma membrane. So by sketching the diagram of this prokaryotic cell, we may say that this is the diagram of the bacteria, which is the prokaryotic cell. You can easily identify the cell envelope. Now see here, nucleus very primitive, so we can label it as a nucleoid. Nucleoid means the genetic material of this bacterial cell. No doubt you will find no any cell organelle here, only you can observe some of these structures that we have labeled it as a ribosome, because in prokaryotic cell not a single cell organelle will be there. Okay, but here we have to show that extensions of this plasma membrane, which may be in the form of mesosome, which may be in the form of mesosome. We have to show the structure that is called as the flagella. By this flagella, bacteria can be identified as a motile bacteria. On this bacteria, you will also find the different structure, and that structure we label it as a pili. So this is structure that is called as pili, and the fimbriae is also structure which shows bristol-like structure. Okay, but it cannot be observed easily, so we can label it as a fimbriae. So students, here if the question is asked for theory point of view, that is draw a neat label diagram of prokaryotic cell, then you have to draw this diagram. Diagram is very simple. You have to first draw three envelopes, glycocalyx, cell wall and plasma membrane. Then at the center the nucleoid material is there, nucleus is there, which is very primitive one, not developed, that is called as nucleoid. Outside this nucleoid there are granular material present, and 70 types of ribosomes will be found. Then extension of the plasma membrane in the form of mesosome will be observed. There will be flagella, there will be pili, and there will be fimbriae. So such a structure of the prokaryotic cell you have to draw if the question is asked to this, that is the draw a diagram of prokaryotic cell. Now student, we have to draw one more diagram for the eukaryotic cell, and as we have seen that eukaryotic cell has two types, plant cell and the animal cell. So here we will draw the first diagram of the animal cell. See here, in the last lecture we have seen the difference between the plant cell and the animal cell. That is, we have seen that the plant cell has the plastid, it has a cell wall, and they have the plant cell has the plastid and the cell wall, while the animal cell do not have the plastid and cell wall. Instead of that, animal has the centriole. So if we draw the diagram of this animal cell, so if the question is asked that draw a diagram of animal cell, then you have to draw the diagram of the animal cell. So if suppose this is the animal cell, okay, we are sketching the diagram of the animal cell. These are the rough diagram. Diagram is also given in our notes. So see, this is the diagram of animal cell. Villi. In any animal cell, you can find the nucleus at the center. But you know that the nucleus of animal cell is well developed. It's genetic material, and number of times you can observe that this nuclear membrane is get connected to one of the cell organelle, and that cell organelle is called as endoplasmic reticulum. So see here, this endoplasmic reticulum has ribosomes on it. So we may say that it is a rough endoplasmic reticulum. This is the diagram of the mitochondria. So you will find lysosomal body. There will be ribosomes. Okay. Then there will be peroxisomes. Then there will be Golgi bodies. Okay, these are the Golgi bodies. There will be smooth ear. While sketching the figure of the eukaryotic cell, animal cell, you cannot draw all the content of that eukaryotic cell, but majority of content you have to show in the diagram. So see here, what we have drawn here, we label it as a lysosome. This is a rough ear. ER stands for endoplasmic reticulum. Okay. Now this is nucleus. Inside the nucleus, you will find one more circular body, nucleolus. Nuclear membrane. Ribosomes. Mitochondria. Golgi complex. If it is a rough ER, then the endoplasmic reticulum without such ribosomes are called as smooth ER. Peroxisome. So see here, it is a diagram of this animal cell. Okay. So in this diagram, an important label we have to label it as a plasma membrane. If the diagram is asked for 3D, then you have to label any 4 labels of that particular diagram. But it is very easy. You have to practice this because the cell organisms which are mentioned here are we have to discuss in detail for theory point of view. Okay, animal cell do not have cell wall, that's why cell wall is not there. Animal cell do not have plastids, so chloroplast will be not there. But here one label is there, that is the centriole, which is the characteristics of only animal. So we have drawn here the diagram of the centriole. In any animal cell, nucleus is at the center. So nucleus is at the center. So see here again, we will revise the labels of this animal cell. These are the villi. What is the role of villi, that we will discuss later on. Lysosome is one of the cell organelle. Plasma membrane is the outermost covering of the animal cell. The rough ER, because endoplasmic reticulum are of 2 types. When ribosomes are present on the endoplasmic reticulum, then it is rough ER. When ribosomes are not present, then it is called as the smooth ER. So smooth ER, rough ER. Okay. This one is nucleus. Inside the nucleus, this is the genetic material. Whole content is the nucleus. Okay. Here we have to label this is as a chromosome, not nucleus. So here, this is the nucleus content. Inside the nucleus, chromosome will be there. Inside the nucleus, nucleolus will be there. And the nucleus is surrounded by this nuclear membrane. Okay, ribosomes are there. As 70S ribosomes are present in the prokaryotic cell, 80S ribosome will be found in the eukaryotic cell. These are the Golgi complex. These are the peroxisome. And here we have seen that one of the important organelle of the eukaryotic cell, and that is the mitochondria, because mitochondria is a cell organelle which is involved in the respiration process in the eukaryotic cell. This mitochondria are called as powerhouse of the cell. Okay, that we will discuss in detail in this mitochondria. But you can easily identify the difference that the plasma membrane is the site of respiration in the prokaryotic cell, while the mitochondria is the site of respiration in the eukaryotic cell. So students, you have to practice this animal cell diagram, which is an example of the eukaryotic cell. Same type of diagram, that is of the plant cell, we will discuss in our next lecture. But observe carefully, you have to draw the diagram of the animal cell. But see here, it is not necessary. It is not necessary to label all the parts of this diagram. Okay, but try to label maximum labeling here, because after getting the complete diagram of the animal cell, you can easily understand the theoretical point of the animal cell. Okay, so it is not difficult to draw this diagram. We have to study in detail the structure of each cell organelle in this eukaryotic cell. So next lecture we have to draw the plant cell, because there is somewhat little difference between the animal cell and the plant cell. What is that difference? That is, in the animal cell or in the plant cell, the nucleus is not present at the center, nucleus is present at the periphery. In the plant cell, at the place of nucleus there is a vacuole, and that is called as the central vacuole. And in plant cell, you will find the plastids which are absent in the animal cell. So students, see here, in today's lecture, we have seen 2 important diagrams of the cell. One is of the bacterial cell, that is the prokaryotic cell, and another one is of the animal cell, that is the eukaryotic cell. As well as we have seen the structure of the cell wall of the eukaryotic cell. In the next lecture, we will discuss the structure of the plasma membrane of the eukaryotic cell and the diagram of the plant cell. Thank you very much.